to the cloud. Hello, this is Laura Victoria Ward in Inner Outer Space Harmony in a Zoom room with other humans all over the world, which is super exciting for me. And today I was thinking we would play a little bit with the tongue and with the psoas. So Liz Koch, who I've studied a bunch with, and she's like the psoas lady, talks about those two muscle body parts as being very sort of similar. So if we looked at our tongue through an MRI, which you can see on YouTube, and you can see people doing different things like opera singing, different types of talking, yelling. I think they do like heavy metal. I don't know, but there's some video that has all these different fMRI side view of the tongue doing these different ways of speaking and talking, and we can see how the movement. So we think of our tongue as being here in the front of our mouth, but it's going down and connecting in. It's this huge, like wavy, amazing muscle. And in our body, the psoas, which is connecting into our lesser trochanter in here at the top of our femur head on the inside and coming up the inside of our body. So there's the iliac psoas. Inside there's the iliac, which is a big muscle that's fanning the inside of this bone. And then there's the psoas that's coming up the inside into about T12. So, and it is this, juicy, she calls it, what does she call it? The filet mignon of the body. So it's muscle fiber that isn't, it's not fibrous in the way that a lot of our other muscles have fibers going really specifically in a direction, but it is very omnidirectional. And in most of our cultures where we've learned to be very erect and not have a lot of fluidity in our pelvises and in our spines, the growth and the movement of the psoas will be very different than in, like, let's say a South American or African country where there's a lot more mobility in the dance and in the movement and the way people walk. Hey, Walter, nice to see you. So I wanted to play with the tongue and the psoas first, and then start to move into bigger space and move into some of the scales and some of the really form-based Laban space. But this initial movement, I wanted to start kind of gradating our movement with the tongue. So starting with the Theta breath, which is a continuum breath, with the tongue kind of just behind the teeth, and it would be a soft S, like a soft hiss, or a soft TH, or even playing back and forth. So if you stick with one, the tongue's going to kind of stay in one shape. But if you go back and forth between, the tongue gets to kind of do some movement. So you can play with that. You might just stay in one. If you find that, oh, I can really connect to this, stick with that. But if it feels interesting to move it around, let it move. So we'll do like maybe a couple of minutes of Theta breath with the tongue there just behind the teeth, and just see how that plays out in your body. And you can do this with eyes open or closed. Closing the eyes brings us more into the internal sensation, but I think sometimes doing stuff with eyes open has great value as well. Like a lot of mindfulness meditation you do with your eyes open. And I think like the bringing into life, into our lives, the capacity to connect to these tools, it's sometimes nice to try with eyes open as well. So that's entirely up to you. You can experiment, change it as it's going along. And let's just go with that for a couple of minutes. So Theta breath, and I'm going to mute you all so that the sound doesn't come through for you. The inhale is just normal, ideally through the nose, and the exhale plays for as long as it feels comfortable. You're not trying to extend it. So letting that one come to a close and just taking maybe a couple of breaths, resting in open awareness so that you can feel whatever is happening for you, just tuning into anything that your awareness is landing on in your body. Just a couple of breaths of openness, open attention. So before we go on, I just want to talk a little teeny bit about attention and awareness. And we can think about it as being sort of a pinpointed focus thing, or which we would think of if we're talking in Laban terms, we'd say that's direct space, like an attention, a direct attention to one thing, boom. Or we could think about it as this like indirect global awareness where it's floating around and more omniscient, omnipresent, omni-aware, so that it's in all directions, all senses, or some, like maybe if you think about smelling, like that's not something that usually comes in from one location. It's usually like kind of have to move your head around to see where a smell is coming from. So that might be just an idea of that sort of omnidirectional sensing. And we can work with any of the senses, the visual or the sort of touch, where it's like I'm feeling into one area or I'm feeling into all the areas. So letting your awareness play completely with that, where it doesn't have to be focused and pinpointed or expansive and all over the place. It can go on any kind of travels that it wants to, or that is interesting within your body. So the next layer, we're going to go, there's two different sort of intermediate layers that I've been playing with that take us from theta into a little deeper. So one is like so it's mostly letting my tongue go like, and I don't think I can do it with you'll hear it. My tongue almost like goes, and it's almost like my tongue is rounding so that the air can go a little bit more through the middle. And then it's widening out. So basically the idea is just to give your tongue, not just the tip of your tongue, but now the middle of your tongue, this chance to kind of experience different types of movement. And maybe you'll discover something else in there that's interesting to play with. So there's no vocal cord action. It's just breath. And you're letting the tongue dance around in your mouth and like fatten and widen and play around with that. So let's go with that for a couple of minutes. I'm going to throw one more thing in there. It may be also easy if you have some spit in there to sort of make some gurgly sounds. So it could be very, you can let the water part play out with the air or not, really up to you. It might feel gross or it might feel good. And I'm just going to add another layer. We can start to think of all the way down the throat, the whole shape of the tongue. So it's almost like your mouth is a cave with water inside and air. And as you can play with the shape of your throat, your tongue, your mouth, and let these sort of sounds of water and air kind of play out. If that feels uncomfortable at all or weird, you can come back to theta or just resting breaths. Nothing, no big deal. Just play with whatever kind of breathing is interesting. But if it's okay to play with that sort of deepening of the letting your tongue free up, letting your mouth and jaw be very relaxed. and letting that come to a rest. And again, just tuning into whatever you're feeling, whatever sort of awakened or went to sleep during that. I can feel that my parasympathetic slow down nervous system is a lot more aligned at the moment. So coming into a little bit more slowness. So we're going to talk back and reflect, but we're going to go one or two more layers deeper, and then we'll come back to the talking and reflecting. So what I want to offer now is that you can play with any of those sounds, the theta or the any of that stuff, and you're just going to invite the idea of moving down that whole, is it the alimentary system, eating, the gut body, the tongue to tail. And as you're moving down, you're tuning into the awareness from the tongue into the psoas. So we're going kind of like organs and muscles together. And you're just going to allow your body to sort of free up and mobilize so that the organs are having a chance to do all of their squishing and mobilizing. And the psoas also is getting a chance to have some freedom, maybe in support and in alignment with those organs. And when I say in support, I don't mean that it has to do something to be supportive. It's just finding that neural, I want to say neural nourishment, but I actually mean hydration and opening up this fluidity from that whole gut body system, tongue to tail, but including the idea of the psoas in there. So that deep core muscle where it gets to just squish around and be the soft uncooked steak that's actually alive inside our bodies. So letting yourself play with that, like maybe micro movementing it up, down, forward, backward, however it wants to squish around in there for, let's go for like 2 or 3 minutes, and add any sounds that feel interesting. So any kind of gurgling, bubbling, hissing, breathing, or no sounds at all. Sometimes it's too much to have all that stuff going on. And sometimes it adds an access point or an entry point. So however it feels interesting to you to free up the internal systems so that they have a chance to kind of release some of the personality pattern of being a human and just to come into more of a sort of gut body, squishing, expanding, hydrating pattern. There's all that peristalsis going on all the time, right? That kind of massaging of the food down the tube, and then these sphincters that close and so things can't come back in the other direction. So it's all of that kind of like ringing happening, but you don't have to do anything. It can just happen because you're just allowing the movement. I'm feeling that softness, neck, jaw, tongue, down through that whole tube. For some reason, like I want to let my tongue hang out. It feels so relaxed. So any kind of anything that happens, bring it on, let it happen. Listening in with that maybe open awareness that could be anywhere or very specific. And imagine really tuning into deliciousness. Like, oh, the yummiest thing that's so nourishing is going into my system. Since we're working with this gut body, I'm taking the most healthy, juicy, delicious nourishment, and it's moving into my body so that my cells and my blood and all the things are having a party. It's so good, this nourishment. And letting that just play out. Really free flow, maybe balances of free flow and bound flow, fluctuating where it's kind of controlled and then free, and then controlled and free. And I feel like that's kind of like the idea of peristalsis, of things squishing and then letting go. So letting that kind of happen. Maybe 1 more minute of that. So if you need to even anything out, good. And then if it's possible for you, before we get together and talk, if it's possible to get up and walk around and feel yourself as a human body walking, do that. If it's not possible to walk around, then don't, or if you don't feel like getting up, that's fine. But if you can walk around, just come into yourself and feel what your body feels like, what your feet feel like, your connection to the ground. Just feeling how it feels. And if any other movement is playing out for you, feel free to let it happen. Like my hands and wrists are kind of going for this thing. My flamenco dancer octopus moment. And my tongue is really relaxed. Maybe shaking some out, also seeing what happens if you shake it a little bit. Yeah, and then letting us come back together to reflect and digest that process, that digestion process, movement and whatever happened to be digested. Just seeing what came up for you during that. So feel free to unmute. And yeah.
So first of all, I had a technical problem because I almost had no energy. That's why I ran away and came back. I had to fix that. I was going to lose you. And then for that experience, that's not something that I often play with, the tongue and all those connections, the tongue, the throat, and the psoas. So it was already a unique experience to connect those, because I've never connected those three. And I got this, so I was having trouble to really feel how long is the tongue, for example, since that's the first time. And then how the tongue is connected to the psoas. So I started to think about, as I was moving, just spinal movement. And I also appreciated when you spoke about the two different, either direct, because in the first exercise of breath, since I'm in front of a computer, I was just doing direct. And it's nice to leave the computer and be indirect.
I think for all Zoom time, allowing that indirect attention is so vital to be able to survive Zoom at all, right? Unless we're in moving classes. Like in Zoom, when I'm moving, it's fine, but anything that's seated and clear, it's really hard to stay here all the time. What else? What else do you guys notice?
I had this image if I was in the water and you have this straw in the water. I don't know the correct English word, but when you see the reflection of the straw in the water, and I had this connection that I felt. I see the water, like the movement also into my body, like that it comes through me, or I don't know, something like that came.
That's excellent. And I think maybe seagrasses are what you're talking about, like the things that are coming up and moving. And I feel like, there's that book, Yamamoto, I don't know his name, but he was right. The Intelligence of Water, Secrets in the Water, all the stuff. And Emily Conrad, who's the founder of Continuum and some of these breath practices, and actually Liz Koch studied with her. So like, it's really a founder of a lot of this material, talked about the primordial memory that's imprinted in the water in our bodies, in our cellular memory of being creatures that developed from the ocean and came onto land. So her book is called Life on Land. And her book is kind of an interesting read that kind of takes us in all these different places. It's not like anatomical discussion of anything. It's like, but it does talk about one thing that she talks about is sort of gel and sol, and like this idea where tissue kind of gels and comes together and then sort of loosens and releases. And I've seen it in fascia, where like there's these sort of jelly like substances that have sort of density within them that are almost like jelly, like they're strong though, they can't. And then if we heated it up, or it could melt and be really fluid. So it's interesting how, I don't know, I'm just throwing more about that water thing out there for you, because I have to talk. Like, what about Walter and Cassie? How about you guys?
The more more I went down further, the more frozen I felt until I got down here where you can't see, and I felt fat. I just felt fat and locked. And it's not the way I like to feel, but that's where it was. But the good news, I learned how to do this. And I'd never done that before, so that was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. And I feel like if you spend some time laying around, you can do this on your back and playing with that sound, you're going to unfreeze some of that stuff.
Okay.
Like think of the same thing, because everything we just did seated, you could do laying down on your back and it would have such a different effect in the body. You could also do it standing up, and you could do it on all fours. So playing with it, well, you won't have the same spit factor if your head is dropped forward. So you can't really get that same like gurgling if your face is down, or you could play it laying on your belly on the ground. So all of this stuff is like just ways of rethinking how we hold ourselves. And when we start to open up the possibilities of differentiated movement that goes in different ways, it starts to let some of the patterning that has served us to be here now as humans in our bodies now, it starts to let some of that patterning fall away, and we can switch back into this more primordial version of being, connected to water, our wateriness. How about you, Cassie?
I'm kind of in like a sleepy place today. I got more sleep last night than I've gotten in a really long time, so it kind of made me feel a little foggy. But so I was really observing and noticing the need for that, even on like I'm oftentimes hesitant to drop down so much when I feel a little tired, because I feel like I need something that's gonna make me more up here. So so it was nice, and it was different to allow myself the space to drop down even more. And I think that sometimes that can be recuperative. I got cut off a little bit in my experience. So when you all started walking around, I was still kind of micro moving, but that was just something that was standing out for me today, that I was observing about myself. And I think if I give myself permission and time and space to do that when I'm feeling dropped down already or tired or lethargic, it might actually eventually pick me back up.
Yeah, interestingly, I just want to say this has been my experience of working with the continuum work. Like if I do a sort of exercisey somatic class where I'm moving, I'm hydrating all the tissue and but I'm not going into those deep places, I usually come out feeling like, okay, now I'm ready for my day. But what I found with the continuum work and starting to go into that really deep layered stuff is that I just feel like, oh my God, I need months and weeks of this. So usually after a continuum class or something like that, I'm not, oh, now I want to go do 10,000 things. I'm more like, okay, now I need to just shut down a lot more. It's like we so rarely let ourselves slow down in our society and come into that rest, digest, soothe, and settle, where like we are just living in such a hyper speed world. Yeah. And I love to sometimes participate from that place of, oh, I'm just in this weird internal kind of relaxed place, not the normal speed demon that I am, and to feel what it's like to be in whatever I'm doing from that place. I feel like, oh, it's kind of juicy and delicious. And it's also kind of like you're on drugs, like in a good way. It's the good part of taking, I don't know, different types of mind altering substances or body altering substances, that a lot of those feelings can be achieved without any drug, just by going in and just feeling into self and what that is. All right. So I did want to get bigger, and I did want to work with more structure, but I think I want to do it in a gradated way. So I want to do it from starting. You could be seated, you could be standing. So however you want to play this out, but let's just play first with vertical up and down. So I'm going to start seated, just playing with up and down, sometimes both happening in the same time, or maybe. And if you're in the quiet zone, Cassie, you can do it with your breath. Like if you want to stay down, you don't have to go big. So it's really up to you guys where you feel like you want to be with this, and really listening and honoring the information in your body. And feeling, I want to also add into the what is up for you in any way to interpret that. What is that up place? What feels up, and what is down for you? And there can be multiple answers to that. And I'm already starting to add spiraling because I feel like I need it. So if other dimensions are starting to come in, we were working primarily with the vertical up and down, but I'm starting to twist, which is bringing in the horizontal for me. So I'm actually just going to bring in the whole horizontal plane and let myself have some free movement in that. Oh yeah, I can feel my spine starting to crack. Letting yourself play and letting yourself really just play in space. So yeah, I thought we were going to go more form, but start to find the forward, backward as well. So we have up, down, side, side, forward, backward, the vertical dimension, the horizontal dimension, the sagittal dimension, and then also the planes, the vertical plane, the horizontal plane, the sagittal plane. And just to see for you today, and this could be seated, standing now I've moved enough, I'm ready to get up. What is there a plane that you feel more connected to today? Or is there a dimension? You feel more vertical plane or more vertical dimension, more horizontal dimension or horizontal plane, or more sagittal? Sagittal dimension, just forward, backward, or sagittal plane, the wheel plane. So is there something in your movement that feels like, oh yeah, I just need that? So maybe taking some moments within it to pause. And see how each, how things land. There's that whole idea of connecting heaven and earth, right? The sky and the ground. Is there something you need more in your life? You need more upness and lightness or more groundedness? Or maybe more community with the sort of horizontal plane, your big table. I think most people at this point are weirdly either community starved or loving the introversion and uncertain of how to branch back out to other people. So yeah, you can find stuff in the horizontal plane, gathering and scattering, sharing, taking it in, giving it out. Yeah. Or, or you can pinpoint, I'm going to that point, or I'm going to really back up and take some space. Feel into the backspace. And when I feel into my backspace, I can be feeling into what supports me. What's holding me up? What's got my back? Or I could also be thinking back into what's behind me, what's come before. I have to say, for me, I don't think back very much. So I'm usually thinking more of that being the support. Who's got my back? What's got my back? Or if I take myself back, how does that feel? How does that land? How much space do I have when I go into my back body? And it made me want to touch my front body. So feel free to just play. I'm giving you my story. Let yourself find what your story in your body is today. Yeah, could be a story on the floor. Actually, yeah, so feel free to use the floor, use the ceiling, use the walls, use the sky, use the tree, use the chair, use the ball. Yeah, use whatever you got to support you and to support this moment of you. And then I want to invite the more sort of cubey diagonal things, the three-dimensional, where we're reaching into those diagonals, maybe crossing things, taking us arms together, arms apart, but letting yourself get out of this octahedron and out of the planes and into the really three-dimensionally cube spaces, crossing, swinging, arcing, maybe having your Jose Limon dance moment, which can be very satisfying, playing with suspension. So letting yourself play with movement. What feels good? What feels interesting? And stop once in a while and see what you notice. maybe take in somebody else on the screen's movement. Or if you're watching on the film, take in some of my movement. Or imagine somebody else's movement, just trying on some other things, if that's interesting. If you're in your jam and you're happy, stay there. If you're happy and you know it, stay in your jam. Clap your hands. Yeah, but giving yourself a chance to be in yourself, but also in the group. And the group might just be me and you, if you're watching this on the video. And from that place, I just want to bring it back to the idea of our tongues and psoas. So still moving, however, is interesting, but bring the awareness into your tongue and psoas. And imagine that if you're thinking of moving from that hydrated gut body place, how does the movement start to express? What becomes interesting? In the tongue, psoas, that three-dimensional depth of that whole core of your body, from your pelvis to the crown of your head, with jaw, neck, throat, pelvis, big iliac bones, sacrum, tailbone. How can the tongue and the psoas inform your movement? I'm just imagining, so Cassie's got her baby, Blake buddy. That's a lot of his experience is that tongue to tail experience of the inner body making gurglings and drooling, pooping, all the stuff, all the baby things, digesting without any extra belief system imposed upon him about what his body is supposed to look like or feel like, or how it's supposed to be. So how inviting in that baby body tongue to tail aspect, how is it interesting to play with that tongue tail, letting go of the trappings of personality and cultural, political, all that kind of stuff that affects how we pattern our bodies and our movement. Allowing yourself just to differentiate in different ways and inviting in. So this is not a very tongue psoas-y thing. I guess it is kind of a psoas-y thing in your torso, but maybe not so much in your tongue, but inviting in the spiral. So I think the spiral and the whirlpool and the eddy are very much water things, but inviting the dance of the spiral into your movement. If we were talking in Bartenia terms, we would say rotary factor, rotation. Oh, speaking of the gut body, I'm getting bubbling up inside my gut body. Breathe. And then letting it start to wind that down. Maybe just taking it as a sort of slow motion for a minute. Seeing what comes on awareness as you slow down. What kind of movement patterns are interesting? What body parts are you feeling? Letting it come into stillness. And then feeling into, once you've arrived in stillness, feeling into what is the desire in the body. Rest, running around, eating, moving more in any kind of way, just tuning into what does the body mind want, coming from body first. Yeah, allowing any more movement to come in and come online. What ideas are easy to let go of? Or what self-limiting factors can you shake off? It's all in our bodies. Just giving yourself permission and access to being in your body in whatever way feels delicious and good. Also thinking about the tongue as how we taste life, how we take in, and also how we share out what we say, coming through our tongue. So how we share ourselves with the world. And that whole throat thing is very much about who we are in the world. What are we saying? What part of us is going out in the vibration of sound into the world? And then let's bring it back together and have another check-in. So funny. I'm really like, part of me really wants to be like specific love on space. And then the other part of me is like, no, I just need to move. I want the freedom. So how is it all landing for you?
I'm in the place that I am surrounded by people that make me mad, and I have a problem with getting angry. And now at this moment, my angriness is coming out all the time. But when I was moving, I had problem like making the movement directly and up the front. I was like going around, and with my verbally, I don't do that anymore. I'm just like, but yeah, when you said what you want to do with your body, I was like, I want to scream like, wow, something like that. But it feels good to express myself instead of being nice to people.
Oh, the struggles of being a human and dealing with other people. I totally understand. And as far as the screaming thing is concerned, I feel like yelling and screaming are actually really good for us. Not to do it at a person in a mean way necessarily, but so what I sometimes do is drive and like, just get in my car because I can make as much noise as I need to. And like, there's not a lot of places where we get to do that, but I think there's something really freeing and healthy. And I also sing in a punk rock band and I get to scream. And I realize like what the embodiment of that is and how like, it's so fun. It's so like, I feel so satisfied after. Like I have one song where I'm playing violin. It's a minute long. And the song is actually called Even Death is Life. And I'm screaming and playing violin at the same time. And it's like, the violin sounds like a siren. It's going woo, 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 woo. And it's the most intense workout that I get, just trying to sing into the microphone and play the violin and let this thing. So I feel like there's a lot of that we need. And that's gets stuck in our tongues, in our psoas, right? So when we can let some of it out, whether it's through movement, through expression, through writing, through painting, it's so healthy. And some people actually need to hear no and fuck you, right? Some people need to hear that too. Like, so you're not alone in whatever you're going through, right? Yeah.
I kept seeing Kathleen's background, wondering if it was virtual or real, thinking it was real. It is real. And saying, oh, and this urge to go out in my backyard, just lie down in the grass, say bye. I almost left. I said, no, I'm going to stick it out this time. I was in a very much more calm space than you are typically. And so I just sort of went into myself with all the movement. And You'd say something, so let me check that out. Yeah, check it out. Because I can be very laid back. That's the word, laid back. I know if I'm going to meet someone, if I go someplace where I'll see everyone, they'll see me. So I won't move around. I'll just wait and look. They will come. They will come. That's how it was for me.
That's wonderful.
And yeah, I'm in France and I'm very much enjoying the garden right now because we have had so much rain in Brittany. So we had to wait a long time for this one beautiful weather. And now every chance I get, I'm barefoot outside. And it's very nice to dance outside.
Oh,
So-
yes.
Yeah.
We had a
So-
lot of rain and today is a beautiful day. Okay, I'm sorry. I won't interrupt you again.
Oh, no, no, no. No problem. So the voyage started on the chair and I liked that too. I liked it starting on the chair because I had to shift around. I have a back to my chair, which doesn't always help sometimes. So swinging from one side to the other, that was nice. And then going in the space. One time I went a little bit too fast and I caught my foot on a bush that's next to me and I actually crashed. But you didn't see that because it was off screen. I was spinning too much. So I wanted to spin. And it was actually nice when you again spoke about the tongue and the psoas because it brought me a little bit more down. And then I wanted to be slow. And what you said earlier was very resonant to me because in this kind of movement, which is very liberating for the articulations, when it's a flow like that, it just is really nice to feel the weight and the swing because the whole, it's very transformational. It's not like you have to move your arms. It's like they're swinging. So that was very pleasant, like tassels.
Yeah, I feel like the Limon, I don't know if you ever studied it, a Jose Limon dance technique, but it's all like these swings and it's all like these, lemniscatic patterns that really move. And I mean, I've barely ever taken it, but I've seen it a lot. And it's like, I can relate to it. It's so satisfying, both to watch and to do.
When I was very young, when I was very young, I worked in the school of Eric Hawkins. I was dancing there. So that's the first person that was somatic and speaking about these kind of things, which for me was like unheard of, coming from classical dance, unheard of. So it's interesting to do these shifts.
I completely agree with you. I had a ballet teacher, Jackie Villamil, who was teaching. She was a Laban. That's my first experience of Laban movement analysis. And I was like, oh my God, now this suddenly feels right and it makes sense. So then I took like a workshop with her and then I went and studied and it took me a long time to get in because there wasn't a year-long program. It took me like a couple of years because there wasn't a program running that I could do. So I did my intros and I was like waiting and waiting to do this work. Cassie, anything to say? I know you've been kind of in and out with the Bambino.
I know it's just so nice to have freedom of movement, but also have a grounded starting place from the internal and then move it out to the external. And it's so interesting sometimes when I feel like, oh no, but I just want to lie here. I'm not ready to move big. And even though you said do whatever you need to do, once I just let go and kind of see what everyone else is doing and then let my body take over instead of my brain, whatever happens just feels good. So need more of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I've actually been doing a bunch of like the Mark Welsh EYP and his Foundations of Embodiment course, and I'm doing them all like sort of as an assistant person learning. I've gotten it all for free, thank God. And because I was really wanting to discern what is this stuff all about. But one of the things that I really appreciate is that I can say to you, you can do whatever you want. But to really take that in and feel like you have the freedom to do whatever you want, especially for a dancer, is really hard. I mean, even doing the course, I'm doing it online, so I can do whatever I want. Nobody's watching me, but I'm like, I can only do this for a few seconds. I can't stay there. It's too uncomfortable, or I need to do this. My body needs this, but I'm used to listening to my body so much that I can be in a structured class and do the structured class, but if it's not super intelligently created, I'm like, I just don't need to be there that long. I got the thing. I understand. But then there's these layers of understanding, right? That's me as a like embodied expert. But can I be the person going, well, what does it really feel like? How do I feel here? Can I go a little deeper? Can I understand more about this? Can I keep coming back to it? You know, so it's even layers if for being every day is a different day in your body, and like to take off the I'm a teacher hat and just be like, I'm just experiencing it, and I'm going to experience it in the way that they're offering it, or I'm not, you know, but to make the choices like all the time, like to discern, do I need to do it this way? Do I need to do it that way? And then to trust that whatever's happening is exactly right because it's the way it has to be, you know, like the huge, you're doing exactly the right thing. But it's hard to listen to ourselves. And I think especially for dancers that have been trained to often do things that don't feel good, they don't want to do, and to be accustomed to feeling pain in our bodies, and sort of discerning whether that's, you know, workable pain or not. But I think that people that, like, I had a friend who was a very large woman, and she said she felt like she was a head on top of a body, and this body had nothing to do with the person up here. And so it's like that kind of disconnection, whatever the Descartes body mind split, although it happened way before Descartes, like, you know, even the Greeks were doing their ways of separating the body and the mind. Yeah. And so I feel like people are like, oh, we're coming back together where we were. And it's like, I don't think we've been in this connected place since we were much more animal people. So coming back to our animalness, loving our animal body and our animal nature that doesn't have so much impingement of form coming from other ideas. But then there's that social centering idea of, oh, those people are moving like that. How does that feel? And as somebody who's very connected to other people moving, I like to try on other people's movements a lot. And it always brings me joy to watch people moving. Like Anthony can do anything, any kind of dance, anything, the dumbest thing in the world or the most sexy thing in the world or anything. And I'm like, oh, I love it. It's amazing. So just also tuning into, I'm saying about 6 different things along this tangent of thought. So, yeah. So let's come back into our bodies one more time, and let's do the same. We'll go out the way we came in, not from the bottom up. Well, maybe from the bottom up. Let's do it. Let's do it from the bottom up. Let's go into thinking psoas, belly, tail, the end line of the gut body. So some people say like tongue to tail or lips to anus, any way that you want to think about it. I'm far too immature to be able to say that without laughing most of the time. So coming from the bottom and just waking up in the, what the psoas, thinking really psoas in relationship to gut body, with what kind of movement would be delicious and nourishing. And whenever you're ready, it doesn't have to be yet, but eventually getting to the next layer of that kind of spitty gurgling, tongue in the throat. Whenever you're ready, you could still be more psoas. We'll take a couple more minutes for this whole thing. Or add it in and go back down. There's no, it doesn't have to be linear. And at some point coming into the, just the, where it's not so much in your throat, but just more in the tongue. And then whenever you're ready, taking it to just theta with the tongue behind the teeth with the TH or the S sound. And then whenever you're ready, just taking a couple of resting breaths in open attention, open awareness, letting anything that arises arise. Or let it sink. I feel like I'm feeling more sinking and descending in my body than arising. So letting the whatever's in there sink, ascend, descend, whatever. Yeah. And then letting us come back in together for our last minute. Yeah. Well, nice to see you all. Any final words, or are we done?
I feel
Wow.
relaxed.
Me too. So just remember, always, you can always pause, right? And come into just a minute. It doesn't have to be an hour of exploration. It can just be a minute coming in. What's the tongue doing? What's the psoas doing? All right. Well, I'm going to close it out. Thank you so much for being here. My pleasure to see you. Woo. Sparkle fingers, also known as American Sign Language clapping and jazz hands. All right.